I hope you like looking at the screen because we're going to be here a while. There we are. Yet. Nobody. Oh. His breath rises and falls, the living weapon groaning in pain as he slowly moves. His arm lumbers forward, tubes of green, blue, and orange present on his guarded arm. He is a being feared through the city. He is a claw. And yet he feels ill. He was sent to Lobotomy Corporation under the head's orders. Just as he arrived, the library formed and he was trapped in some dark crevice. Whether intentionally or not, he does not know. He rests, his back against the walls. His weaponized arm lays on his lap, as his other arm remains still by his side. His mask is damaged, and his body is still in pain, and he wants to raise his arm and use his green serum, but can't find the strength to do so. He also noticed that his serum W has been damaged. The item's contents leaking into a small puddle, rendering him unable to teleport. He is alone in the darkness, as he's always been. Claws aren't social. He is no different. Arbiters do the talking, and beholders sit and watch. Claws are servants of the head, members of C Corp. And yet he does not feel special. He is under the head's direct command, yet he still feels hollow. He can't recall the names of his fellow claws. Only executioners truly shared their names. Arbiters, meanwhile, always started a sentence introducing themselves. Their large philosophical speeches always made him wish they'd speak clearly. He didn't have time for riddles. He had a job to do, to make himself useful. Yet right now, he is not useful. Gathering dust like a discarded children's toy, a once mighty weapon was reduced to a pitiful display for the shadows to mock. His job isn't easy. The head only dispatches him when they are absolutely needed, so they often face strong opponents. 2 of his brothers died on the raid against the old lab. Against the Red Mist. He remembers the sadness at learning Garyon had passed in their assault. All the arbiters looked down on him, as they do all others bar the head, except for one that seemed interesting in discussing among the claws. He purposefully paid attention to how arbiters spoke so that he could challenge her philosophical views. Claws aren't normally social, but they are competitive. He remembers her smile as they exchanged viewpoints. Garyon would often win, convincing the claw of whatever situation they had discussed. But sometimes he made her back down, though it was incredibly rare. It's not laws, he is a claw. Sorry. It's not love, he is a claw, and he can't feel love. He enjoyed the time they spent together, even if it alienated him further from other claws who despised how the Arbiters spoke. This one was worth displeasing those mindless fools anyway. A claw is meant to be violent, but he'd found that his fellow brothers were focused more on the fun of tearing a man apart than completing their objective. They'd boast about how many they'd slain, or how many instead, or they'd boast over who they'd slain, or how many instead of what they'd accomplished. He personally started quiet. Fuck, my brain is not braining today. All claws aren't social, but they'd gladly brag about their kills if the head himself had awarded them. He always tuned them out on the rare chance they spoke. Claws are tasked with inspecting wings at time. He personally visited R Corp and W Corp. He's not a fan of the trains. Their cloning is interesting, just seeing them slaughter one another was not. In the city, violence is the answer, and the Claw should be prepared to enact it. He can defend himself with tools, but unlike his fellow brothers, he prefers using his words. Perhaps an arbiter would have been a better position for him. He attempts to move, but feels the weight of his weapon and damaged body preventing him. He wonders if anyone is looking for him. Probably not. Anyone he cares about is dead, and the head has no use for claws who fail. Garion's words ring in his head. Failure is a path walked upon by everyone. Treading lightly around it is impossible. Running through it is irrational. Looking ahead is idealistic. Observing the path that allows you to follow it instead of failing away from its spoils. He remembers his retort. But surely some paths require little travel beyond a mere glance. Perhaps allowing others to take that path and then watching how it treats them would be superior to risking your life on a potential loose stone. Like an echo, her reply speaks to him. To not take a step forward is no different than avoiding the path altogether. Admittedly, some can be learned from others, but to guarantee your path stays simple is only possible by treading it yourself. Only then can you follow it clearly. Garion won that game shortly after. It's also the first time he'd tasted tea before. He would not call Garion kind. She lacked empathy and was only fueled by violence and suffering. Similar to a claw, but not exactly the same. Perhaps that is why the two talked so often. They both wanted parts of the other. Arbiters were rarely deployed, and so he saw more combat than she did, although Garion was still stronger of the two by far. Perhaps that is why the two talked so often. They both wanted parts of the other. Arbiters were rarely deployed, and so he saw more combat than she did, although Garion was still the stronger of the two by far. He rests his head downwards as his claw moves slightly. His thoughts focus on another instead of his current situation. It's calmer than awaiting whatever will find him if anyone does. Claws are not designed to love, but it is clear he is an exception. Arbiters aren't designed to love, and it seems she follows that trend quite closely. Although a future between an arbiter and a claw would be impossible, he would still dream of it. Part of him died when she did, although no one knew, not even Garion. Perhaps she did too, to some extent. Garion was always good at reading people, even realizing what they felt before the person themselves did. It's more difficult with claws. They lack facial features. After all, gestures usually gave away their feelings. Still, Garion could read them like an open book if she so chooses, and she taught him a fair bit. They never got close to one another physically. Garion preferred space, and so did the Claw. In combat, he preferred staying back and only landing surprise attacks to minimize contact. Garion simply fired her singularity-fused attacks to tear her opponents to pieces. The only time they ever touched was when they bumped into each other around a corner. He expected Garion to kill him. If he was any other Claw, she would have. They did not speak that day, though he apologized for it the next. In his silence, he regrets not at least trying, sharing his feelings and being done with it. His silence is soon shattered when a man in a black suit arrives, and the Claw slowly lumbers to his full height, prepared to fight, even if it'll most likely be his last. The Claw stood up slowly, its body lumbering to a full height as Roland prepared his weapons from his gloves. The Claw stared at the man who approached him, before turning to gaze at his injured Claw. One serum may be down, but he can still use the other two. He flexes his fingers as green light surrounds him, and Roland charged. As the black silence approaches, the Claw prepares to strike before bullets collide with his frame. He reels back before a hammer collides with his side. The living weapon swings his arm to attempt to cut the fixer into ribbons, but his attack fails to connect. Roland uses this opportunity to slash at the Claw with a dagger before taking a step back. With each attempted attack from the Claw, the fixer evades before striking his body. Once a fair bit of distance has been gained, he activates his Serum R and dashes forward to meet his opponent. Roland responds by blocking the strike and then slashing at his midsection. Soon both fighters arrive at the staircase to the floor of General Works. The Claw clenches his fingers as green once again flows through him. Roland frowns at the action, realizing his opponent won't go down easily even if he seems far weaker than the last Claw he encountered. Though that's why he returned to the staircase to gather allies. The patron librarians hear the fighting and rush to aid, followed by their assistant librarians. Roland's assistants start piling on the Claw, though a quick slash disperses them. Soon he hears footsteps and smiles slightly, only for the Claw to close the distance again using Serum R. Before he can block the strike, Hawkma appears to guard him against the blow. "A strange individual you seem to have found. A member of the Head, yet so far away from him." The Claw responds by swinging again, but Roland uses Durandal to slash at the Claw, forcing him back. In a bright red light, Gebera dashes to meet the living weapon. "I've dealt with 2 of you before. Though it was in my prime, I could still deal with 1. Her rapid slices force the Claw to pull back again, blood beginning to coat the floor below. Prepping his Serum R, the Claw prepares to charge before golden chains wrap around him. He struggles before searching for whoever chained him, before his eyes land on an arbiter. Not just any arbiter, but Garion. Although different in appearance to an extent, he can easily tell it's her. Before the Claw can think to say anything, a strong strike collides with his body and he collapses. His Claw collides with his body and he collapses. His clawed arm collides with the ground, causing a thud to reverberate through the Keter floor as his body drifts into unconsciousness. defeated and expecting not to wake up. The patron librarians all gather around as Hod goes to inform Angela, assuming she isn't already aware. Roland first inspects the creature's pulse before confirming it's still alive. They all seem to gather around it. Some maintain difference, like Tippereth and Malkuth, wary of it springing up to jump them. Bina and Gebbera approach the creature. Strange. Did the head already send another one of us? The red mist was clearly confused. She figured the whole sending them to the outskirts was the punishment, yet to send another claw. Bina, however, shuts down those thoughts. That is not the case. This claw is unlike our previous encounter. Instead of being a claw closer to the head, this one is more distant. Not razor sharp, but a duller tone. More comparable to the figments from our former prison than the tools of an arbiter. Roland takes a few steps before replying. So it's not like Boral? Hockma gives him a nod as footsteps echo from below. The library's director steps forward to inspect the new guest before frowning as she wonders where this creature came from, as she's getting tired of uninvited guests. Turning to Roland, Angela begins speaking. Where did this claw come from? I'm assuming you encountered it due to us being on the floor of General Works. She's worried the head might have decided banishing them wasn't enough. Roland replies with a shrug. I went for a walk around here and it was just laying down near a bookshelf. One serum was destroyed when I got there, so it stood up and started healing, so I charged at it. In hindsight, that was slightly reckless, though he needed to make sure the claw stayed weak. He's seen what a powerful one can do. Malkuth decides to lay in. Perhaps keeping it alive will be more useful. We have a captured claw at our disposal, and so it would be unaware to... Oh, wait, no. Claws are servants of the head, and we can't let it roost here. Gebbera and Hod seem to agree with that statement, though Hockma shakes his head. The patron librarian rebukes. Perhaps keeping it alive would be more useful. We have a captured claw at our disposal, so it would be unwise to take advantage of the situation. Hesed seems to agree with him, along with Yesod. Angela frowns, looking between the two groups. Before he can say anything, Roland speaks up. Perhaps our director should decide the fate of this thing? He turns to her with the hope that she'll make a decision and prevent a possible argument. Angela glares at Roland before interrupting her, before speaking. We will keep him alive for now. Although booking him would be more effective, we need to stay away from the more violent paths. And also she was tired of the whole process, despite having revived them with all the memories staying in their head. Despite having revived them, all the memories stay in their head. She's still a machine after all. Bina then smiles. Very well. I suppose it's best I house the claw while you congregate and decide what you'll extract from the living weapon. Whether it will comply or resist is a matter of the future for now. It's up to our director to guide us on the journey that will yield her the information she requests. Bina calls upon her assistants, who bring the claw down to the floor of philosophy. She didn't bother waiting for the others to agree, as they knew she would be the best at keeping this claw contained, since she had her chains. Bina motions to some of her assistants. Paxia gets some tea brewing, and Ludex sets some chairs up. We are about to have a union that will guide us closer to information that will be best at keeping this claw contained, since she had her chains. Bina motions to some of her assistants. Oh, wait, no. Sorry. If the claw could tolerate Bina's crueler nature, then she has no doubt they will get along once more. Though she is not expecting her fellow librarians to get along with the weapon. It's time for a reunion. And that is where I think I'll end this, since nobody showed up. 20-minute stream. Still got one in. That's all. Good night to nobody, I suppose.